Okay, why don't we go ahead and start? We have a nice healthy number that are attending right now. And if you're just joining us, welcome to our Taming the Privacy Inbox, which is a webinar being sponsored by Ethos Privacy. We have three terrific panelists today, and I think you're really going to enjoy the discussion that ensues as they talk about specific examples, what they've encountered, and different types of workarounds and ways to look at this troubling problem with expediency and a great process going forward. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over to Grant. Grant is going to go ahead and introduce the rest of the panelists. Again, as a reminder, please put your questions into the chat and we will follow up with you as soon as we can. And the webinar is being recorded so that you can pick it up later. Thank you so much and welcome to the webinar.
Great, thank you, Karen. So my name is Grant Barrett, and I'm a privacy consulting director at Ethos Privacy. I help design, build, and operate enterprise privacy programs. I currently work for a Fortune 50 retailer in their privacy program, as well as a few other small to medium-sized enterprise clients. What all of my clients have in common is that they need access and to process personal information. And this is a key to their success. And so retaining customer trust and confidence, as well as their partners and regulators, is a concern that I'm constantly addressing. So I enjoy the challenge, and this is a great topic and right at the heart of a lot of the issues. Jason?
Hi, my name is Jason Aiden. I'm a privacy program manager here at Ethos. I've been in privacy about 2 years, and I'm also working with a client on a privacy inbox system. And I'm actually very happy to be on this panel, and I thank Karen and Grant for inviting me.
Hi, I am Jennifer Ruhr. I'm of counsel with Hinsey Law. We are a privacy and security law firm exclusively, and we work with small, medium, and large businesses to help implement, operationalize, and maintain their privacy and security programs. Subject access requests or individual rights requests are a large part of the work that we do.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'll leave this to you, Jennifer, if you want to talk a little bit about this.
Right. So when you're thinking about your processes and designing a program for handling individual rights requests, or in the EU, they are often called DSARs, or data subject access requests. It helps to have a program that has been implemented, that you've got playbooks, that you've trained staff on. And the reason is for what you see on the screen here: risk reduction, staff efficiency, and scalability. With risk reduction, it is incredibly important to know when a request comes in, who's going to handle it, how it's going to get handled, and how you're going to respond to it. And it seems relatively simple when you say it like that. It gets a lot more complicated when you actually have to dive in and do the work to respond. So for example, if you have a customer out there, oftentimes it will be through a poor customer care experience, and they're a California resident. They are going to submit an access request or a right to know request. They don't know who to send it to. Maybe they don't know that they need to look at your privacy policy, so they search on LinkedIn for somebody that works at your company, and then they send that inquiry to whoever they find. That person is likely not going to be the person that you trained, in your customer support if they didn't reach out there. Or maybe they are in customer support, but they don't recognize this as a right to know or an access request, and they delete it. If the person, if it was from somebody they didn't know, maybe they were, thinking they were doing the right thing under your security policies and thinking they got a phishing email, and they, it goes in their trash bin on their computer. Or you get the Good Samaritan, somebody who gets this and doesn't know who to send it to in the company, but they want to do the right thing by this customer, and they send all the data that they can find. Unfortunately, that information that they send has the data of a bunch of other customers. So either way, without some sort of formal, privacy and box management structure, or, at least a procedure, these are the types of things that very easily can and have happened with clients that I've worked with. It also, from a risk perspective, thinking about timing, you've got 30 days in the EU and UK, you've got 45 days in the US. If you don't have a procedure set up and you know where the data is, who your folks are, your contacts in the business to get the data from, how you're going to assimilate that data, how you're going to report that data, how are you going to validate the data subject, which oftentimes is incredibly challenging given the information that you have. If you haven't gone through that process and have a point of contact that can help manage and drive those processes, it becomes a big deal, a fire drill in an instant. And we'll talk about some of the obligations, especially under CCPA, a little bit later, but from a risk standpoint, the penalties in California, at least, are, there's definitely some civil penalties, some money, fines, things like that, but there's also injunctive penalties as well. And so you want to make sure that whoever is handling these requests know what they're doing and know where to go to get the information. Staff efficiency, again, if you've got people all over the business that could receive these or are receiving these, it becomes very difficult to manage from a staff perspective. There are a lot of people generally involved in an access request or a deletion request, and you want to make sure that everybody's aware of what their responsibility is and that there's some sort of procedure and funnel for where that information goes and how that's responded to, or else you could have a lot of people being pulled off of high priority projects in order to address these things if they're treated in more of an ad hoc way. And then that goes to scalability. There was a report, I believe it was last week, from the IAPP that had gone and looked at a lot of companies' transparency reports for CCPA about how many access requests they've received, deletion requests, and do not sell that they've received over the last year. And one of the outcomes of their assessment was, volumes are rising. And that's just one state right now in the US that has that request or that requirement. That will be 3 states, at least 3 states by January 1, 2023. California will be adding employee data, which is, a lot of data if anybody is working in the employment area. And then of course we've got the EU and several other countries outside the EU that have these. So we anticipate that you're going to see volumes go up, and as volumes go up, you need a repeatable, scalable process to manage them.
Thank you, Jennifer. So kind of the other picture is, how does this work in your environment? Who benefits from it? From my client's perspective, the privacy inbox is often manned by a privacy analyst or someone out of your program management office, usually relatively low on the authority channel. And so one of the issues is if you have a box that's unmonitored or is infrequently monitored or is monitored by someone who's not fully informed of all the business initiatives, you end up with an ad hoc response, and business communications look poor to the outside, both to customers and to regulators. And additionally, if it's as things come up and you're doing an ad hoc response, I've been in meetings where we'll have 4 or 5 people all discussing a proposed response to an email. And while it's a fun chat, it certainly does consume quite a bit of time, and you get this ad hoc response. So the business really benefits from having a structured response where at a fairly low operations level, individuals are authorized and given guidance. That provides brand protection in that the image that you're portraying to the outside world, to your customers, and to any regulators who are looking at your responses are considered and comprehensive. It reduces regulatory risk And it gives you a greater sense of confidence within your business that you're addressing it. From the customer's perspective, often getting involved in a series of communications back and forth with the privacy, whoever is responding in your privacy inbox saying, no, that's not what I meant, this is what I'm after, or you didn't answer my question, or there's no answer and I'm still waiting to hear from you. All of that leads to a lack of confidence in the enterprise that's processing your information. Getting back a clean, clear, definitive response from the privacy office in response to your customer complaint or inquiry is essential to maintaining trust and confidence. Where I've seen some of the greatest benefits are actually the individual employees who are tasked with this. This can be stressful. Managing these incoming communications, not knowing who you're supposed to go to in an organization, getting different answers from different people as to how you should respond. And it's just a constant source of churn. So the employees themselves who are given the opportunity to take some amount of ownership over development of a standardized response protocol, knowing when and to whom to escalate issues, not having to kind of hunt and seek, really adds to the employee's job satisfaction and gives them ownership over the process, and takes some of the uncertainty and fear that I see when you have a privacy analyst who's been charged with this inbox and really sees it kind of as a dragon that they're constantly battling. So there are benefits for everyone in having a structured approach to the inbox management, and the benefits to the business, to the customers, and to the employees are all substantial once you've done this right. Jennifer?
So in the regulations, the way that that CCPA is set up, right? You've got the statute and then the implementing regulations. One of the risks that having a streamlined workflow, like a monitored privacy inbox, will help with is this do not ignore requirement. So under the regulations, if somebody submits a request that is similar enough to what the regulations require, but maybe doesn't meet the letter of the law, you're required to respond to that request. And in order to do that, you need to have people that understand what the law requires, who have been trained, and that understand the legal implications if a request is ignored. So if you've got a managed inbox, then your employees can kick off the procedures that are in place in order to respond to that request. And side by side with that is this training and record keeping. So under the regulations, anybody who is responsible for handling inquiries under the CCPA must be trained. And organizations are required to maintain records that have to then be disclosed in their privacy policies or linked to from their privacy policies. And that includes how many right to know requests were received, how many were denied in whole or in part, and same for right to or request to delete and opt out. So having some sort of streamlined way of managing this is also going to help with these record keeping and training requirements, and help keep you out of the eye of the regulator in the event that they aren't handled properly. I believe the California regulator at least came out recently and stated that there's a 30-day cure period in the event that you have been found to violate or have been accused of violating a certain provision of the CCPA. And it's unclear now whether that kicks off when the individual submits their complaint. So maybe they submitted a do not or I delete my data request, or a right to know request. And that response didn't get responded to within the 45-day period. If they if they should write in and say, you didn't answer my request, or maybe it became public. You're part of an article that disclosed, this company isn't responding to requests after 30 days. The California AG has said, that could kick off your 30-day cure period. So it's really important to treat these in a methodical and streamlined way.
Jennifer, following up on that, do not ignore. One of the things that I see in the environment is for my clients that have set up a web interface for ingesting the privacy requests, such that now the inbox is no longer a method for ingesting any of the privacy. So if you're asking for a report of your data, or you're asking for a data deletion, or you've got do not sell, if all of these are done through another communication channel, and this privacy inbox is then kind of sitting here listed in the privacy policy, what I've seen happen in environments is then it doesn't get the level of care or attention. And that's where this do not ignore can become a real trip for a company, in that someone can be submitting a deletion request improperly because it's not the designated channel through email. And the company has a web form to intake that, or has a user login to intake that. And now we have this email box, and it's got privacy requests in it that are inappropriate, but this do not ignore seems to mandate then that you have to take this seriously and either honor it as a privacy request or properly redirect that. Are you seeing that in your experience?
Yes, I have seen that. And it's important that if you have a privacy policy that offers one way to, submit questions or inquiries, complaints, but you also have a portal, right, with a form that allows another way, that both of those are monitored, right, or your privacy policy is updated, as it needs to be in order to address those. But I agree with you, Grant, that it's like it can end up, you could have a, privacy at, companyabc.com. And if that is not monitored, and you're only monitoring where the form is coming in, that's going to, create some issues from a regulatory perspective. And, you could have a bounce back for anybody who submits things that you don't want coming into that mailbox to meet the E2 requirement, providing the consumer with information on how to submit the request, by saying, if thank you for your inquiry. If this is, if you're submitting a right to know request, please, submit this through our portal. But it doesn't necessarily, it's helpful, but it doesn't necessarily absolve the company from reviewing if that inquiry had been submitted via that email.
And that seems to be something that I see, is that a company gets enthusiastic that now I have this a new pathway other than email to ingest these privacy rights, but then the privacy inbox then gets very little attention because it's no longer where they're looking for it. But it's clear from my experience, especially the privacy agents continue to use the privacy email inbox, regardless of a channel that may be designated otherwise. So I certainly see that.
Absolutely.
Jason.
Thank you, Grant. I'm going to talk about the deliverables. I think if we take a look at the specifics of a privacy inbox managed service, we'll see the deliverables are fairly straightforward. Privacy problem solving is really about leveraging existing tools. And one of these tools, of course, is use cases. The operation of an inbox management service has to start with input. After all, the primary function is the processing of the inbound emails. When you're only getting a few emails a day, it may be hard to see a pattern. If you're inundated with emails, you may not have the resource to do a proper analysis. Nevertheless, when your inbox starts receiving tens or hundreds of emails in a week or even a day, then you need to identify the patterns and develop a process. So the first step we found is categorizing all these types of emails into use cases. Fortunately, everyone under a similar privacy regime gets essentially the same types of emails, and a managed service can certainly give an inbox program a leg up at identifying these use cases. once you have your use cases, you kind of move on to templates. Once you know what you're dealing with, you need to determine how you want to respond. Templates are a great asset here. The benefit is, of course, you provide a consistent response. I think Grant talked about ad hoc responses and some of the challenges there. And these templates can be cleared through your legal and organizational review. And when you combine the use cases with templates, you can create a matrix, which helps you take a lot of the guesswork out of responding and dealing with the majority of the emails. And finally, you have escalation paths, or I shouldn't say finally, but this is a critical part of it. While the majority of your use cases will have templates, you'll have some that won't fall into a really appropriate template. And of course, we can identify these as a use case, but there's no pre-approved template. And so if we say maybe 80% of your inbound emails will cleanly fall into a defined use case with a corresponding template, that means you still have to resolve the other 20%. And providing a robust escalation path for these outliers can reduce the liability that could result if someone tries to apply an inappropriate template or take a stab at an answer. In addition, escalation paths allow you to fine tune your use cases and your templates. If you take an initially conservative approach with your use cases, you'll have a lot of the emails fall through into your escalation path, but these can be analyzed and then you can broaden your use case filters to pick up more of these emails. So it's kind of a continuous quality improvement scenario that you set up with your escalation paths. Finally, of course, there is the documentation and training. As people move through your privacy organization, SOPs will help keep things running with minimal interruption. And this part of a managed service agreement can also address the CCPA's 99 or 999317, the training requirement. And with that, I will turn it back over to Grant.
Thank you.
So Grant, can I make one statement on the response templates? I meant to cover this in the risk section. So as you're thinking through your response templates, they're a great tool to help mitigate your privacy risk when you've got a number of different scenarios, starting with, how are you validating, the individual who's coming in and making the request. It helps streamline, the entire procedure, but it also reduces your legal risk, because what you want is your response templates to mirror your public statements. So if you've got, your privacy policy says one thing, and somebody responds about how a certain, product or service or business process is collecting and using data that isn't covered by your privacy policy, that's going to create risk for the company. Or if you've got somebody who's not as familiar with some of the importance of some of the terminology that we use in these, templates, and they don't provide. So in Europe, right, you have to provide very specific language about, what an individual's rights are under the GDPR, for example, that they have a right to contact their supervisory authority if they have questions about that response. There's very specific things that need to be part of any sort of response. And if they are missing, then, that can go to a regulator. And I know that how regulators respond to those types of inquiries is they generally follow up on them. And so that, one poorly written response from an access request or a deletion request can lead into some sort of regulatory inquiry. So you want to make sure that those response templates have been reviewed against your internal policies, reviewed against your external statements, and meet, the legal requirements for whatever jurisdiction you're in.
I agree completely. Being down at the operations level, having the templates is your security blanket. You've identified your use case, and then having approved language to apply and send back out. Also, often the templates are designed to kind of be a dispositive answer to the question, to give, if this is what you're after, here's where you go. If this is what you're after, here's where you go. Here's where to see this information, so that you don't engage in kind of a serial communication where the issue keeps changing within the thread. That's another thing that I've seen, is that you end up in a kind of an ongoing conversation. So these templates provide a whole bunch of benefits at the operations level. And you have a good deal of confidence when you're applying them then that legal is behind you, leadership is behind you, the rest of the privacy program is accurately reflected. And it also reflects the tone and tenor of your your customer interaction, how your company likes to interact with its customers and clients. So that I agree with you that the template and the importance of it, that it's reviewed and that you've got a lot of eyes on it, is really the secret here. Going through just kind of a day in the life of the how it works in practice. So again, just to mirror what Jason was saying is you've got someone in charge of their inbox and they're monitoring it. You may have a team if you're a large enterprise, but even then, usually you're going to have someone primarily assigned in that day. They're going to be monitoring communications. Generally, what I do is give that individual access to a matrix of use cases. They're trained on it. They're familiar with it. It would describe the use cases. They usually would have a title and then a description so that you can match the kind of free text that you're getting coming in with a given use case. And then in that matrix, it's linked directly to the template that's then pulled up, customized for this response if any customization is necessary. Usually, most of the time in our responses, we try not to overly personalize it. May simply just say hello, comma, and then the text, and then at the bottom it'll say, the privacy office, so that we're not encouraging individual conversations, we're not encouraging a continued dialogue, and we're giving them the approved response without editorializing. The goal here, or at least my goal in these processes, is to be able to handle 8 of 10 communications through use case identification and response templates. That's what we'd like to be able to deal with. And then you'll have a list of escalations. You'll still have use cases for those, but instead of applying a template, an escalation is sent. So this communication then would be forwarded to the appropriate person. Rather than kind of have a committee approach, often a use case will indicate that it goes to a specific person. If let's say that hypothetically there's a claim that my information was breached, it may be that anytime the word breach or lawsuit is mentioned, certain escalation paths are then triggered, and it goes to individuals that essentially demand that any such accusation or claim gets to their eyes. So you'll have escalation paths. Those need to be monitored by the person who's watching the inbox to make sure that a response is provided and that it's being handled, that it's not just a handoff again to and not being disposed appropriately. There's also tracking generally of all the communications and the responses. And when escalations are implemented, these all should be kept in a log, and they can then produce reporting both to the privacy program leadership and executive leadership when they want. All of this escalation and tracking also is part of, as Jason hinted at, a continuous improvement where your use cases are constantly kind of being fine-tuned. So are your response templates as they appear to need to be tweaked, getting the appropriate approvals. And so what you've really done is empowered right at the front line, the ability to triage those cases, get them disposed or escalated quickly so that you're turning around quickly. Because again, as Jennifer's indicated, if this is your 30-day cure, if the AG is going to take the position that you've been notified that there's an issue here, and you have 30 days to fix it. Waiting for a week or even 2 in order to get this into the right hands or the right spot, it is a real risk to the organization. So that's kind of a day in the life of how this process or a structured approach would work. I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time. And so this is kind of our opportunity now to take questions and engage in more of a interaction with the participants. Jennifer or Jason, I don't know if there are any other comments that we missed or that you'd like to make.
I would be interested to hear Karen and Grant talk about privacy agents, third-party services that are now being used. How do they change the landscape in your experience, Karen? Or sorry, Jennifer and Grant.
Sure, Jennifer, I'll let you go first.
So they have created an interesting issue for organizations, specifically around I guess, two areas. One on validation. So you definitely want some sort of template response to deal with these, because they can come in, but you're going to have to do something to in order to validate the user, right? Because they're sending those on behalf of the individual whose data you need to either provide or delete, which under CCPA and other laws they have a right to do. But you also have an obligation to validate that individual on whose behalf they're making that request is the person making that request. So that creates some challenges, and you want to make sure that you've got a workflow for that, because under CCPA, especially, the clock doesn't stop. That 45-day clock does not stop for you to validate the individual. You need to be moving ahead and pulling together that information as if that person's going to be validated. You just can't send it until they are. And so these services create a bit of a challenge there if you don't have like a streamlined way of validating people when you get an on behalf of request. The other challenge is that they can be used in a way that floods an inbox, and we internally have called that like being DDoSed with privacy access or deletion requests is essentially what that can be. And so you need to evaluate that and have a plan, an escalation path for that in the event that should happen. Is that enough to trigger the extension under the law? Those are conversations you'd want to have ahead of time with your legal team, and you'd want to be able to figure out if there is what the operational steps would be. Do you need to be able to shut down whatever that portal is at that moment in order to manage it? Is that even an option under the law? But it is definitely something that needs to be part of your organization's playbook or SOPs, so that you know how to deal with those when they come in.
Yeah, I agree. It's very challenging. You have the challenges you've mentioned of identity verification. Often you'll get an email that'll say, I'm X company on behalf of, Jane Smith, your customer, who wants you to delete all her information. So I don't know if it's a large company. I could have 200 Jane Smiths in my records. So I don't even know which Jane Smith it is. So the difference often is going to be, I need to verify the identity of the specific data subject. I also need to validate their data in my system, find the right Jane Smith's data. And sometimes the data validation will require a different point of data, let's say member number or an invoice number or something to tie the individual to records in the system. So again, this is a use case when you have an agent coming and making a privacy request on behalf of another. You also have their authority to make the request. So are they authorized to do this? And what is your process for that? So of course, I'm a big proponent for having something other than an email intake for data subject access requests. But I understand, given the technical capabilities and the posture of certain companies, it's just the way they do it. But you're going to have to address all of these issues and give standardized, and intelligible and actionable responses to these, because my goal is to treat all privacy agents as I would the data subject. So that means that if they haven't given me the information, I need to give it to them quickly. This is what I need. This is where you should go. This is our portal. This is our process. And this is what you need to have when you do that, right? You need to be able to verify identity, verify authority if it's on behalf of, and sometimes companies may have unique data points they need to validate the data in their systems, even once they've verified a given individual's identity, especially if they're using like a third-party identity verification service rather than an online login that gives you both identity and validation in that login process. But for my customers that are clients that do not have an online, 100% of their customers have online logins. They have real challenges, and these agency requests or these agent requests present a real issue. And it comes to the privacy inbox, even when they have a web form, and they have to have a response that's intelligent, respectful, and provides, kind of actionable advice. And as you say, they can get lots of them. They can get 200 in a day. So having a templated response and the ability to get it out, even if you have to ramp up some extra resources to get them out as soon as possible, just not letting anything age in that inbox is another kind of push for me. Jason, I know that you're working in a different environment than me, and you're seeing quite a bit of this too.
We are, and I think it speaks to something you just mentioned, in that when you receiving a manageable amount of emails or requests, email is not a bad channel, but when you're getting hundreds of them, then you start looking for other ways to address that. And I think that I'm certainly seeing my client looking at a different channel, a web portal, as opposed to allowing the email. And so it becomes kind of a logistics challenge as well as an informational challenge.
So I don't know if there are other questions that participants would like us to address. I don't know if Karen is there and if she has saved up any zingers for us.
I don't have any zingers for you, I have to say, but I want to thank everybody for attending this session, and we will be recording it, of course, and we'll have it available on our blog immediately following this. And I appreciate so much your time, Jennifer, Grant, and Jason. This was a very interesting panel, and it's a timely topic. So thank you again for your participation, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.